The story that I'm about to tell you really happened. These events happened in the 1950s in Wisconsin, but the names and details of the story have been changed to protect the privacy of the victims. Merrillville was a town where everyone knew everyone else, and the Greene family was no exception. However, while most homes bustled with the sounds of daily life, the Greene house was different. It was quiet, almost reverent, dominated by the presence of Amelia Greene. Inside, the walls were lined with religious texts. Passages from the Old Testament and the Book of Revelations were prominently displayed, their pages often read and discussed in the Greene house. Young Ethan Greene, with his bright eyes and tousled hair, would sit by his mother's side, absorbing every word she said. Amelia, a tall woman with stern features, would read aloud from the scriptures, her voice filled with passion. "Ethan," she would say, her eyes intense, "these words are our guide. They tell us of the world's wickedness and the salvation that awaits the faithful." Ethan would nod, hanging on to her every word. To him, Amelia wasn't just a mother. She was his teacher, his protector, his world. The tales of fire and brimstone, of sinners and saints, shaped his young mind. The outside world, with its games and laughter, seemed distant and unimportant compared to the lessons Amelia imparted. At school, Ethan's behavior was marked by peculiar quirks, the most notable being his sudden, inexplicable bouts of laughter. These outbursts would arise without any apparent trigger, echoing eerily in the school corridors or during quiet moments in class. This, combined with his tendency to avoid eye contact and his habit of muttering to himself, made him an object of both curiosity and unease. Friendships eluded him, not just because of his oddities, but also because he seemed indifferent to forging connections, content in his isolated world. Outside the Greene residence, the townsfolk of Merrillville whispered. They spoke of Amelia's fervent beliefs, of how she kept Ethan away from other children, of the strange singing that sometimes emanated from their home late at night. But for young Ethan, Merrillville's murmurs didn't matter. All that mattered was the world Amelia painted for him, a world where the righteous would be saved and the wicked punished, a world where he and his mother had a special purpose, guided by the scriptures she so dearly loved. The sun had barely risen when the news spread through Merrillville. Henry Greene, the older and more sociable of the Greene brothers, was found dead near the woods. The shock was palpable. Henry, with his easy smile and friendly demeanor, was a stark contrast to his younger brother Ethan, whose peculiarities were well known in the town. The details surrounding Henry's death were murky. He was found at the edge of the woods, not far from the Greene residence, with no clear signs of foul play. There was some bruising on his head, but no sign of an injury that could have been fatal. The town's doctor could only conclude it was a tragic accident, perhaps a fall or misstep, and the official cause of death was listed as asphyxiation. But in a town as small as Merrillville, where whispers traveled faster than facts, rumors began to circulate. Some said they'd seen Henry and Amelia arguing a few days before his death. Others claimed they'd heard strange shouting from the greenhouse the night he died. And a few even whispered about Amelia's intense religious beliefs, suggesting she might have seen Henry's death as a sacrifice or test of faith. Ethan, already an outsider, was further isolated by the tragedy. He was often seen wandering the spot where Henry was found, lost in thought or perhaps seeking answers. The bond between Ethan and Amelia seemed to intensify, their shared grief pulling them closer. Amelia's teachings took on a more fervent tone, with frequent references to life, death, and divine will. The townsfolk of Merrillville watched the Greene family with a mix of sympathy and suspicion. While many offered condolences, there were hushed conversations in the town's diner and general store. The mysterious circumstances of Henry's death, combined with the Greene family's already peculiar reputation, made them the subject of much speculation. Lucille, the town's baker, whispered to her regular customers, "It's a tragedy, no doubt, but there's something not right about that house." Old Mr. Thompson, who had lived in Merrillville his entire life, would nod in agreement. That Amelia, with her scriptures and prophecies, who knows what goes on in her mind? A number of years passed, and controversy and distrust continued to swirl around the greenhouse. The community was shocked when the news of Amelia Greene's sudden stroke spread through town. The once vibrant woman, known for her fervent religious beliefs and commanding presence, was now bedridden, her once strong voice reduced to feeble murmurs. Ethan, already a recluse following the mysterious death of his brother Henry, was devastated. He was often seen by Amelia's bedside, holding his mother's hand, his eyes red from tears. The bond between mother and son, always strong, seemed to intensify during these trying times. Over the coming weeks, Amelia's condition worsened. The stroke had left her paralyzed on one side, and her once clear mind now often wandered. But in her lucid moments, she clung to Ethan, imparting final lessons and beliefs, urging him to stay strong and hold on to their shared faith. Amelia, with her stern features illuminated by the dim candlelight, took Ethan's hands into her own, her grip firm yet trembling. "Ethan," she began, her voice heavy with urgency, "you must always be wary of women. Many of them are temptresses, using their allure to ensnare unsuspecting souls. They will try to seduce you, to lead you away from the path of righteousness with their charms. You must resist, for such temptations are the devil's tools. They will pull you into sin, and once ensnared, it's a path that leads straight to hell. Beware of women, Ethan." Her eyes, intense and unwavering, searched Ethan's, ensuring her warning took root deep within him. One cold evening, with the wind howling outside the Greene residence, Amelia passed away. The news spread through Merrillville, and the town, already wary of the Greene household due to past events, watched with a mix of sympathy and suspicion. Ethan's world crumbled. The loss of his mother was a blow he couldn't bear. The large house, once filled with Amelia's prayers and teachings, became a tomb of memories. Rooms that were meticulously maintained now showed signs of neglect. Amelia's religious texts lay open, as if waiting for her return. Ethan's behavior became even more erratic. He was often seen speaking to himself, or perhaps to the memories of his lost family members. "Mama," he'd whisper in the dead of night, "why did you leave me?" The scriptures, especially the book of Revelations, became his refuge, the words echoing Amelia's teachings and offering a semblance of comfort. The nights in Merrillville were usually quiet, with only the occasional hoot of an owl or the distant bark of a dog. But as the months passed after Amelia's death, a new, eerie presence began to make its mark on the town's nocturnal landscape: Ethan Greene. Ethan, already a subject of town gossip due to his family's tragedies and his peculiar behavior, was now frequently spotted wandering the local cemetery. At first, townsfolk thought he was visiting the graves of his mother and brother, a grieving son seeking solace. But as time went on, his visits became more frequent and prolonged, often lasting until the early hours of the morning. His behavior at the graveyard was odd. He wasn't just mourning, he seemed to be searching for something. He would often be seen kneeling by random graves, his fingers tracing the inscriptions, muttering softly to himself. On some nights, he'd bring along Amelia's old Bible, reading passages aloud by the dim light of a lantern. The town's whispers grew louder. "He's lost his mind," Mrs. Patterson, the postmistress, would say, shaking her head in pity. "First his brother, then his mother, and now this. It's a sad sight." But not all the talk was sympathetic. Some began to speculate about Ethan's true intentions in the graveyard. "Why's he always there? It ain't natural," old Mr. Grady would grumble at the local diner. After Amelia's death, the Greene residence had transformed into a place of shadows and whispers. Inside, the rooms echoed with silence, save for the occasional mutterings of Ethan, who had become increasingly reclusive. But it wasn't just the isolation that concerned the townsfolk. It was the nature of Ethan's activities within those walls. Late at night, lights would flicker from the basement windows, casting eerie shadows. Sounds of hammering, sawing, and muffled chants would occasionally drift into the night, only to be abruptly silenced. One evening, Mrs. Thompson, a neighbor living a few houses down, decided to pay a visit to the Greene residence. Concerned about Ethan's well-being, she approached the house with a freshly baked pie as an excuse, but as she neared the window, a sight caught her eye that left her frozen in horror. Through the gap in the curtains, she saw Ethan, surrounded by mannequins. These weren't ordinary mannequins, though. They were dressed in Amelia's old clothes, and their faces seemed to be crudely crafted to resemble her stern visage. Word of Mrs. Thompson's discovery quickly spread through town. The town was abuzz with whispers and speculations. "He's trying to bring back his mother," some said, while others believed he was enacting some dark ritual. Ethan's actions grew more desperate. He began to collect items that once belonged to Amelia, her hairbrush with strands still attached, old dresses, and even her shoes. He was often seen talking to the mannequins, seeking their guidance, just as he had with Amelia. The line between reality and delusion began to blur for Ethan. In his mind, these lifeless figures were his connection to Amelia, a way to keep her presence alive. The teachings she had instilled in him, the warnings about the world and its temptations, played on a loop in his mind. Merrillville, with its quaint houses and tree-lined streets, had always been a place where residents felt safe. But as the days grew shorter and nights longer, an undercurrent of unease began to permeate the town. Strange occurrences had become too frequent to ignore. It started with missing items from the graves in the local cemetery. Flowers left by loved ones would vanish overnight, and small trinkets or mementos would disappear without a trace. Then, more alarmingly, fresh graves appeared to be tampered with, the earth disturbed as if someone had been digging. The town's suspicions immediately turned to Ethan. His late-night wanderings in the graveyard were well known, and his recent erratic behavior only fueled the rumors. "It's him," Mr. Collins, the town's butcher, declared one morning. "Who else could it be? The boy's lost his mind." But it wasn't just the graveyard incidents that had the town on edge. Residents began to report seeing Ethan at odd hours, lurking near their homes, peering into windows, and sometimes even sneaking into their backyards. Mrs. Davis, an elderly widow, claimed she once found him in her garden shed, muttering to himself and holding a bundle of old clothes. Amidst the growing fear, a group of concerned citizens decided to confront Ethan. Led by Mr. Collins, they approached the Greene residence one evening, determined to get answers. But what they found only deepened the mystery. The house, usually silent and foreboding, was filled with the soft hum of a melody. Following the sound, the group found Ethan in the living room, surrounded by the mannequins dressed as Amelia. He was singing a hymn, his voice breaking with emotion, while the mannequins stood still, their blank faces staring back. The sight was both heartbreaking and unsettling. The group left without a word, their quest for answers replaced by a heavy sense of pity and concern. Merrillville's sense of unease reached a fever pitch when news broke of a disappearance. Clara Mitchell, a young woman known for her vibrant personality and active role in the community, had gone missing. She was last seen near the outskirts of town, heading home after a late shift at the local diner. The town was in an uproar. Search parties were organized, and every corner of Merrillville was combed for any sign of Clara. But as days turned into weeks with no trace of her, hope began to wane, and suspicion took its place. Given the recent events and Ethan's erratic behavior, whispers began to circulate, suggesting his involvement in Clara's disappearance. "He's always been odd," murmured Mrs. Lawson, the town's seamstress. "Who knows what he's capable of?" The Greene residence, already a focal point of the town's anxieties, became the subject of intense scrutiny. Late at night, some claimed they heard muffled cries coming from the house, while others swore they saw shadows moving behind the curtains. The town's sheriff, a pragmatic man named Sheriff Daniels, decided to pay Ethan a visit. Knocking on the door of the Greene residence, he was met with silence. After several minutes, the door creaked open to reveal Ethan, his face pale and eyes darting nervously. Sheriff Daniels, trying to keep the conversation casual, inquired about Clara and if Ethan had seen or heard anything unusual. Ethan, visibly agitated, denied any knowledge and seemed eager to end the conversation. But as he was about to close the door, the sheriff swore he heard a faint moaning sound that came from the depths of the house. The sound sent chills down the sheriff's spine. Determined to get to the bottom of things, Sheriff Daniels, with a few deputies, conducted a thorough search of the Greene residence. The house, with its dimly lit rooms and eerie mannequins, was unsettling, to say the least. Amidst the clutter and old furniture, they found a makeshift shrine dedicated to Amelia. Candles, religious texts, and personal belongings created a haunting tableau. And at the center of it all was a piece of fabric, a waitress's apron, stained and torn, eerily similar to the one Clara wore at the diner. The discovery of the apron in the Greene residence was just the beginning. As Sheriff Daniels and his deputies continued their search, the true extent of Ethan's descent into madness began to unravel. Hidden behind a false wall in the basement, they found a room that seemed to defy all logic and reason. Inside the hidden room was a collection of objects that sent shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned officers. Please be warned, dear reader, that the objects found in the Greene's basement were truly horrifying. The items found are too gruesome to show, so we will just list them here. Some of the objects found in Ethan Greene's basement included bowls made out of human skulls, chairs with leather made from human skin, a belt made from human female nipples, a wastebasket made from human skin, a lampshade made from the skin of a human face, 9 disembodied female genitals stored in a shoebox, various masks made out of human faces, a number of human organs being stored in plastic bags, including a heart, a number of noses, lips, and fingernails, leggings made from human leg skin. The final blow came when the sheriff discovered a shallow grave in the woods near the Greene residence. Inside, they found the remains of Clara Mitchell. The town's worst fears had been confirmed. As the investigation continued, more unsettling details emerged. Journals found in Ethan's room detailed his obsession with making a suit out of skin. He was stealing the remains of women that resembled his mother and using their skin to create a likeness of her. He believed that by assembling a figure in her likeness, he could wear the skin suit himself and be reunited with his mother. After the townspeople had become suspicious of his activities in the graveyard, he was forced to stop stealing bodies and had turned to murder more recently in order to complete his horrific suit of skin. The once quiet town of Merrillville was now thrust into the national spotlight. News crews and reporters descended upon the community, eager to cover the shocking events surrounding Ethan Greene. The town's courthouse, a modest brick building that had seen little drama over the years, became the stage for a trial that would be remembered for generations. Ethan, with his gaunt appearance and vacant stare, was a stark contrast to the bustling activity around him. As the trial began, the courtroom was packed, with residents and outsiders alike eager to witness the proceedings. The prosecution laid out a damning case. Evidence from the Greene residence, including the gruesome patchwork suit of skin and Clara Mitchell's remains, painted a chilling picture of Ethan's actions. The journals, with their frantic entries detailing his obsession with recreating his mother, were read aloud, sending shivers down the spines of all who listened. Witnesses, including neighbors and townsfolk, recounted their interactions with Ethan, further highlighting his descent into madness. Mrs. Thompson, still shaken from her discovery of the mannequins, spoke of the eerie atmosphere in the Greene home and Ethan's unsettling behavior. However, it was the defense's strategy that caught many by surprise. Instead of denying the accusations, they argued for leniency based on Ethan's mental state. Expert witnesses, including psychologists and psychiatrists, were called to testify. They spoke of Ethan's profound grief, his isolation, and the overwhelming influence of his mother, Amelia. They painted a picture of a man lost in his delusions, driven to commit unspeakable acts by a mind that had long since fractured. After days of testimonies and deliberations, the jury reached a verdict. Ethan Greene was found guilty but deemed mentally unfit to stand trial. Instead of a prison sentence, he was to be committed to a mental institution, where he would live until his death. Ethan Greene would die from lung cancer at age 77 while still incarcerated.